Hello tiny friends and welcome to my channel. I'm Jolene and today I'm going to be creating two more pieces for the hall tree. But before I do that, I actually thought of creating one more detail to add to the hall tree. So I'm going to do that really quickly because it's going to be super fun and quick. And I also just wanted to show you that I did not forget to finish the bottom here. So this is what it looks like. And I also aged the inside of the bench. Not that that's going to matter now, but I did it before I actually thought about this final detail here. So I have this tiny piece of fabric and it kind of looks like a quilt. So what I'm going to be doing is actually adding it to the bench and making it look like the lid has been shut down and closed on the quilt, and all you're going to see is a tiny piece of that quilt poking out. So I'm going to begin with some liquid stitch and I'm just going to create a seam right along the edge here. Now tiny friends, this is a really simple and easy way to create an added detail to any one of your pieces that is supposed to open and close or actually does open and close. So it doesn't matter if it actually opens or not. You can add a tiny little piece of fabric right to where it's supposed to open and make it look like something's been shut down or something is actually inside that piece. So a dresser drawer, or any drawers, an armoire or a wardrobe, anything like that. And it's just a cute way to give it some added detail. Very simple and very fun. So now that I've got my piece here, I'm just closing it. The liquid stitch is still wet, so it's just going to seal this nice and tight. And I'm going to go with this side here because it looks like an actual quilt where you can see both patterns. So now I'm just going to close up the remaining two sides with some more liquid stitch. And after I closed this, I realized it was a bit flat. So this is where I actually should have added a little bit of stuffing in between those layers to give it more of a quilt look and thickness, like a real quilt. But I did not think of that at this point and sealed it shut, and it looks like this. But I did come up with a solution to help give it that added look, and I'll show you that here in a bit. So I'm just straightening it up a bit. I have a little square, and you can probably go with a smaller piece of fabric to give it this added detail. But now I'm going to take my fabric tack, and I am at the very end of this bottle here, so it is super thick and very slow and ooey and gooey like molasses. But I do end up getting enough out to finish this final detail here. So I'll be putting that on my list to re-up on this fabric tack here. But now I'm just going to take it and I'm going to tuck it in and glue it right down to this piece here. And I'm just tucking it in and gluing it down and closing the lid. So now that I have it into place and where I want it, I don't want it to stick up a little more than I would like it to. So I'm just going to add a little bit to the flap here and glue it shut to the front of the hall tree, and that'll keep the fold into place. And this is where I'm realizing that it's a little bit flatter than I wanted it to be, but that's okay. I have this cute little quilt inside, and I did have a little bit more of that fabric, so why not add a quilt inside, right? So that's what I did, tiny friends. I added a little quilt inside in case anybody wanted to open it up. They can see that there actually is a quilt inside. So for the front flap here, all I did was take in a little bit of stuffing and shoved it right underneath that flap. There was a little open pocket, and that helped give it a little more thickness And I also left some peeking out from the side to make it look like there was a little tear in the seam. And I just love this added detail. So let's begin with the two items. Now I have this embroidered piece here, and I've also got this trouser sock here, and this trouser sock is really thin and stretchy. It has a nice little design on it. It almost feels like a thicker stocking, but I thought it would make a great sweater for the old man. And with this piece of embroidered lace, I've taken it off of an old shirt and thought it could be a shawl for the old lady. So I want it to look like they're hanging naturally on the hook. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to use my watered down glue solution to manipulate the shape. And before I do that, I have to prepare the haul tree with a piece of foil. So I'm just taking some tin foil and I'm manipulating it into shape and shaping it right around the haul tree and just covering it up to protect it. You can see the hooks have poked through, so I'm just adding another piece here and pressing down nice and tight around the hook pieces. And then what I'm going to do is trim off that top seam to this lace piece and dip it in the watered down glue solution. Now I've squeezed off as much as I can because I don't want it dripping wet. I just want it to be nice and damp so that when it dries, it still looks natural and it doesn't look like it's been glued and sealed and layered with a glue solution. So I'm just folding in the sides here so that you don't see where I've cut off the trim. And all I'm going to do is just manipulate it into shape. And you can get this look with any type of fabric for anything that you're going for, whether it be bedding or curtains or blankets or clothing, just to give it a more realistic draping. This is how you would achieve that look. And the watered down glue solution is the same solution I used to create the hats in the DIY hat series. So all I'm doing is just going to fold it right over one of the hooks and tuck the top part right down over the hook like it would naturally hang on a hook. And then I'm going to take a clip here and just clip it right down to that hook and leave that clip there while it dries completely. So this is what it looks like. And now I want it to hang in a natural way, so I'm going to create some folds and creases like it would naturally look while it's hanging in real life. So I'm just doing that here, tiny friends, and I'm going to add a couple little pins to keep it in place. Now I did add some tin foil underneath this piece here that you see so that the pins won't actually poke into the haul tree. So I've placed another piece underneath to catch the pin. And I'm just adding 2 or 3 pins here to keep it in place, and then I'm going to let it dry overnight. And you can see what that looks like here. And I'm just going to set it aside so that I can move on to the old man's sweater. Okay, so I did a Google search and I found a real life template for a shirt or a sweater, and all I've done is shrunk it down to the size I needed. Now, tiny friends, this is not a tutorial by any means on how to make miniature clothing. I am just doing what I think makes sense to create a little sweater for the haul tree. So I'm going to take this template here, and I decided to go with using the top part of the sock here because it has a natural seam here, and I thought that would make a great seam for the shoulder seam on the little sweater here. So I'm going to lay my template down and figure out where I want it so that I can eyeball about how much of the fabric I need to cut. So once I get it into place, I am actually just going to take my scissors here and give it a little snip right along the bottom of the template. And once I get my little snip into place, I can then just trim off the remaining piece. So now I have my piece, I have my template, and I started thinking, and I said, you know what? I'm going to pump the brakes on this, tiny friend. Okay, so I have this template here, and in my mind I'm thinking I really do need to create a whole sweater. And I really don't know why I was thinking that, because honestly, I lack the experience, and with that comes the skill of how to make miniature clothing. So I am definitely going to make a mental note of that so I can learn how to do so in the future. But really, all I need to do, tiny friends, is just fool the mind with a little bit of eye trickery. So I'm just going to toss this template aside and, well, let me show you what I mean. Okay, so I have a piece of fabric here, and it probably measures about 2 inches, maybe 1.75 inches, I don't know. But I have 2 pieces, so I'm going to be creating 2 parts. And all I'm going to do is basically the same thing I did with the shawl. So that wasn't a full shawl, it was just a piece of fabric made to look like a shawl. And I really honestly don't know why I was thinking I needed to create a whole sweater, but I was thinking that, and I was thinking hard about it too. So I am just going to basically do what I did with the shawl with 2 pieces here, and I am going to dip it in the solution and just lay it down here like this. And I'm actually going to tuck the top part in. I'm going to use my tweezers here and just get it nice and tucked in around the top part of that hook there and clip it into place. Easy peasy, right? Who needs to make a whole sweater? But anyways, I am going to just, I'm actually, because this is such a stretchy piece of fabric, I'm just going to pull it down and stretch it out and add a couple pins to keep my folds into place. And that's really all there is to it, tiny friends. It's not any more difficult than that. I don't know what I was thinking. Honestly, I really don't. Okay, so now I got my sleeve, and it's just slightly smaller than the previous piece I was working with. And I've folded the ends over on both pieces to make it look like there's a cuff or a band going around the midsection, like a real sweater has. And I'm just going to lay it down next to the midsection piece, next to the first piece. I'm not really going to do much to it. I'm just going to lay it right in between those pins, and then I'm going to let it dry overnight and come back to it. And this is what it's looking like so far. You can see it's kind of looking like a sweater. Okay, so now the pieces are dried. I have 2 pieces here. I have a sleeve and I have a midsection to the sweater. So the next step is to glue these 2 pieces together to create one piece. I'm gonna play with it a little bit on the hook to see where I want it to lay and to see how it's laying. And I'm going to do the same thing with the sleeve. I'm going to lay it next to the midsection, and I'm just going to figure out the placement of these 2 pieces before I glue them together. Now I do want that sleeve to be showing almost completely, but I don't need 2 sleeves to be showing. I just need the one so that the viewer can see, okay, this is a sweater. And then the other sleeve will be hiding and tucked in on the other side of the sweater. But psst, we know there really isn't another sleeve, is there? So it's all left up to the imagination from here. So I'm just going to let the imagination take place. So what I'm going to do is glue the sleeve to the midsection, and I'm using my Fabric Fusion because you saw I was pretty much out of fabric tack here. And I'm just gluing the top part of the sleeve down to where the shoulder area would be. And right now I'm just adding a little bit of weight. It's a brand new bottle, so I'm just going to put a little bit of weight on it until the glue takes hold. But I am going to glue another section which will be on the bottom part of the sleeve here, and I'm just going to glue that right on top of this bottom corner of the midsection right there. So I'm just going to put a little dot of Fabric Fusion right here on the bottom corner, and then I'm going to lay the sleeve on top. Now I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to weigh it down until it dries. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you some pieces that I worked on while I was creating this project here. Okay, so here are both of the shawls that I made. And the first shawl, I used this little brown embroidered knitted piece, and I wasn't really too sure about it. The holes were quite bigger and I just didn't know about it, tiny friends. But then I found this embroidered piece here and I thought it was much prettier, and the holes were smaller, so I thought it would work out a little better, and it actually did. So I went with this little tiny piece here to create a shawl. And now, tiny friends, this is hilarious. This is the first sweater that I created, and it definitely does not look like a sweater. It looks like a jacket to me. It's very bulky, very thick. There's a lot of glue on it, and it's pretty rough looking. So I decided to not go with this piece at all because it was not what I was seeing in my head. Then I went with this one. Now, this one again looks like a jacket, not a sweater. And I got a bunch of glue all over it after it was dried, and I was trying to glue on the trimming pieces because both pieces started to fall apart after they were glued together and then dried and then dipped into the glue solution. Once they got wet again, they began to fall apart on me. So I don't know, if I need a jacket later on, maybe I'll revisit these pieces and try and clean them up some. Or maybe by that time, I'll know how to make miniature clothing a little better. But this is the result of no experience making miniature clothing, tiny friends. But if anybody does know how to make clothing, I will definitely appreciate any suggestions or tips that you may have. So here are the final results. And I really hope you enjoyed this video today. And if you have, please click that like button and give it a thumbs up and let me know so in the comments below. And also, if you're subscribing, don't forget to hit that top notification bell button so that you can be notified every time I upload a new video. I want to thank you all for watching, and I want to thank everybody who has subscribed to my channel. You guys mean the most to me, and I'm so glad you're enjoying my content. Now here is the little sweater that I was going for. I was trying to go for that thin sweater that the older men would wear in the 1930s, and I really like it much better than the jackets that I've created. So when I come back, I will be creating the final 2 items for the hall tree, and then I can put it in its permanent place in the Josephine house living room, and we'll take a look at it with all its final details. So come back and see what I make and how I do it. And until then, tiny friends, you all have a lovely day. Bye-bye.